The day was everything a bride could wish for. The sun was shining, the flowers were in full bloom, and all our closest friends and family had gathered. I was wearing a simple yet elegant white gown that flowed like a dream, and my soon, Tom, looked dashing in his black tuxedo. We had decided on a small, intimate ceremony in a quaint country chapel. As I walked down the aisle, the soft melody of Pachelbel's canon in D playing in the background, everyone's eyes were on me. But mine were fixed on Tom, searching for the loving warmth I had come to associate with him over the 2 years we'd known each other. Something was different, though. Instead of that joyful look I'd always seen, his face was flushed, his lips pulled into a tight line, and his eyes, a perplexing blend of aloofness and something I couldn't quite place. Ignoring the subtle unease that settled into my gut, I reached the altar and took my position beside him. Our officiant began the ceremony, invoking blessings and enumerating the virtues of marriage. I could hardly pay attention. My thoughts were entangled, mulling over Tom's strange behavior. Finally, it was time for our vows. I put my hand in Tom's and looked into his eyes, my voice steady as I recited, I, Margaret, take you, Tom, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Tom repeated his vows in kind, his voice lacking the warmth and enthusiasm I was so used to. Something was definitely amiss, and it weighed heavily on my heart, diluting the joy that should have been filling me. We exchanged rings, and when the officiant pronounced us man and wife, Tom's kiss was mechanical, lacking the passionate sincerity I had anticipated. The moment was supposed to be magical, the sealing of our love, but it felt more like a formality, a checkbox ticked off a long list of wedding to dust. As we walked back down the aisle hand in hand as a married couple, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. We stepped away from the gaze of our friends and family for our photos, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "Is everything okay, love?" I whispered, my eyes searching his face for some sign of reassurance. "It's probably just the excitement," he said, avoiding eye contact as he forced a smile for the camera. His words did little to quell my concerns. "Just the excitement," he said, but there was no excitement in his eyes. None in his voice, and certainly none in the mechanical way he'd been moving through the motions of what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. That day, I felt the first crack in the foundation of what I believed would be our forever. Little did I know that it was a crack that would continue to widen, threatening the stability of everything I held dear. Despite the seeds of doubt that were sown that day, I held on to hope, praying that my instincts were wrong, that his demeanor was indeed because of just the excitement, and that we'd soon settle into the warm, loving marriage I'd always dreamt of. But deep inside, a quiet voice told me something was wrong. Something that would take more than love, more than vows, and more than rings to fix. It was the beginning of forever, or so I thought. The first time we saw the little house on Willow Lane, Tom had jokingly referred to it as the little house that could. Nestled among towering oaks and featuring a garden begging for love, it was the quintessential starter home. I had bought it before we got married, enchanted by its vintage charm and its promise of a future filled with warmth and love. "Think of all the memories we'll make here," I'd said on the day we moved in. I was busy unpacking dishes and placing them in the kitchen cabinets. Tom, who was half-heartedly assembling a coffee table, paused and looked around. "Yeah, it's a nice place, Margaret." "Cozy?" I noticed his lack of enthusiasm but shrugged it off. "Wait till we decorate it, Tom. It'll come alive." Our first few weeks in the house were a whirlwind of domestic bliss, or so I tried to convince myself. I busied myself with painting the walls, setting up the furniture, and planting a few roses in the garden. Tom helped, but his actions lacked the energetic spirit I had hoped to see. We both worked for small companies, me in marketing and Tom in it. Our incomes were modest but sufficient for our simple lifestyle. We managed to put away a little every month, dreaming of vacations we could take or the future we could build for a family. On Fridays, we usually had a date night at home. I would cook dinner and we'd watch a movie. It became a cherished tradition, a momentary distraction from the worries and mundanities of the week. One particular Friday, we were sitting on our old but comfortable sofa, halfway through a romantic comedy. I looked at Tom and felt that familiar, unsettling feeling, the nagging sense that something was missing. He seemed physically present, but emotionally distant, like a man stranded between two worlds. "Are you enjoying the movie?" I asked, trying to gauge his mood. "It's fine," he replied flatly, his eyes on the screen but seemingly focused on something far away. "Do you want to talk about something? You've seemed off lately." I finally mustered the courage to say, pressing the pause button on the remote. He sighed, setting his bowl of popcorn aside. "It's nothing, Margaret. I'm just tired from work, that's all." But the nothing continued to haunt our home. Our conversations grew more perfunctory, our interactions more transactional. There was a new kind of silence that settled over us, one that couldn't be filled by the sounds of laughter from the television or the clinking of our dinner plates. The little house that could was doing its best, standing sturdy and warm against the world outside. I poured all my love and hopes into its walls, fervently wishing it could magically fill the widening emotional gap between Tom and me. It was a few weeks later that I found out I was pregnant. Elated, I thought this would be the turning point, the missing puzzle piece that would finally complete our family portrait. I couldn't have been more wrong, but at the time, hope shone like the morning sun filtering through the curtains of our little house on Willow Lane. And so there we were, two people bound by vows, living under the same roof but growing miles apart. I thought a baby would bridge the emotional chasm that had opened up between us. Little did I know that it would stretch it into a yawning abyss, challenging the very foundations of what I had once naively thought would be my forever home. The little house could only do so much. The real work had to come from us. And as I would soon find out, one person can't mend a relationship that's fraying at both ends. I still remember the moment I found out I was pregnant. The little pink lines on the pregnancy test seemed to gleam like a neon sign, broadcasting a future full of possibilities. My heart swelled with a mixture of joy and apprehension as I thought about breaking the news to Tom. Surely, this would be the catalyst for positive change, a new chapter in our faltering love story. I spent the whole day planning how to tell him. Finally, I settled on a quiet, intimate dinner at home. I prepared his favorite dish, spaghetti bolognese, and set the table with our best china. As he walked through the door that evening, I held my breath, praying that the news would be received as the blessing I considered it to be. "You look radiant today," he said, managing a half smile as he hung up his coat. "Thank you," I replied, my heart pounding with both excitement and nervousness. "Let's have dinner. I've got something important to tell you." As we sat down to eat, I felt the weight of the moment gathering like a storm cloud. We exchanged banalities about work and the weather until finally I couldn't contain myself any longer. "Tom, I have some news," I began cautiously. "We're going to have a baby." His reaction was not at all what I'd expected. His fork froze midway to his mouth, and he stared at me, his expression one of disbelief tinged with, was it resentment? "A baby," he finally managed to say, setting his fork down. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I took the test this morning. We're going to be parents, Tom," I said, my voice wavering despite my attempt to sound upbeat. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as though grappling with a complex problem. "This changes everything, Margaret." "Well, yes, it's a life-changing event," I agreed, trying to keep the hopefulness in my tone. "It's something beautiful, something we can share." Tom's eyes met mine, and in them I saw none of the joy or excitement that a father-to-be should have. "I need time to process this," he said flatly. Process this. Tom, we're talking about a child, our child, I said, my voice rising with frustration and disbelief. From that night on, the threads of our marriage started to come visibly undone. Our interactions became more strained, our arguments more frequent. Tom started staying out late, offering vague explanations about work pressures and needing time to think. And then the drinking started. At first, it was just a beer or two when he came home late. But soon enough, he was stumbling through the door, reeking of alcohol, his words slurred and his eyes bloodshot. Tom, you can't keep doing this. We have a baby on the way. I confronted him one night, tears streaming down my face. That's your baby, Margaret. You wanted it, not me, he spat back, his voice venomous. That sentence hit me like a freight train. Until that moment, I'd held on to a flicker of hope that we could still mend the frayed threads of our relationship, that we could weave them into something strong and beautiful. But as I stood there, looking at the man I'd vowed to spend my life with, I realized that some threads, once pulled, could unravel the entire fabric. And so, we became two parallel lines under the same roof, moving farther apart with each passing day. I focused on the impending arrival of our daughter, pouring all my love and attention into the life growing inside me. Meanwhile, Tom spiraled further into a world I could no longer reach or understand. As my belly grew, so did the distance between us, widening into a gaping chasm that no amount of love or hope could bridge. And when our daughter was born, a beautiful baby girl with a heartbreaking inability to hear, that chasm would turn into an insurmountable abyss. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, all you need to know is that the frayed threads of a relationship can either be mended or lead to an irreversible unraveling. Unfortunately for us, it was the latter. Our daughter, Emily, was born on a crisp autumn morning. Her first cry filled the delivery room, but it was a sound she herself would never hear. Doctors confirmed our worst fears. Emily was deaf. My heart broke not for me, but for this innocent life that had just begun. I held her close, vowing silently to give her all the love and protection she would need. When Tom arrived, his face was as unreadable as ever. I could see he was holding his breath as he took in Emily's tiny features. Then, the doctor pulled him aside to explain our daughter's condition. I watched from across the room, Emily cradled in my arms, as Tom's face contorted into a mask of fury and disbelief. "We can give her all the love and support she needs, Tom," I said, trying to bridge the emotional gulf between us. "Deafness is a challenge, yes, but it's not the end of the world." Tom was having none of it. Not the end of the world. Our daughter is defective, Margaret. Do you have any idea what this means for our lives? For my reputation? I couldn't believe my ears. Your reputation. Are you seriously worried about your reputation at a time like this? Someone has to be, he shot back. As if on cue, the doorbell rang the next day. Tom answered it, and there she was, a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, visibly uncomfortable. Margarita, her name was. Before I could ask who she was and what she was doing in our home, Tom turned to me and spoke words that I never thought I'd hear. "Margaret, this is Margarita. And, well, I think it's time for us to end this charade of a marriage." Stunned into silence, I watched as he retrieved a manila envelope from the kitchen table and handed it to me. Divorce papers. My hands trembled as I took them, the weight of what was happening settling in like a storm cloud. "I found someone who understands me, someone who won't tie me down with children I never wanted," he declared, as if that justified anything. "Understands you," I finally found my voice. "What about our vows? What about our daughter?" "She's your daughter, Margaret," he sneered. "You wanted a family, you got one. Don't make me the villain here." Before I knew it, Tom had gathered a few of his belongings and left with Margarita, leaving me alone with our newborn daughter in the echoing emptiness of our home. I sat down, stunned, staring at the divorce papers as if they were written in a foreign language. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just the affair or even the divorce. It was the complete and utter abandonment of his family, of a daughter who would never hear her father's voice, never know his love. In those excruciating moments, I felt a strange amalgamation of despair and clarity. I was hurt, yes, but I also felt an unshakable resolve forming within me. As I looked at Emily, her tiny hands curled into fists as if ready to take on the world, I knew I had to be strong. For both of us. Tom had turned his back on us, but I would be damned if I allowed his betrayal to define our lives. And so, I picked myself up, both literally and metaphorically. I signed the divorce papers and began the arduous process of legal battles and emotional recovery. It was tough, but the judge ruled in my favor, granting me custody and most of our possessions, save for the family car, which Tom drove away in, a fleeting symbol of a life he was leaving behind. But for every ending, there's a new beginning. And as I closed the chapter on a failed marriage and a dream that turned into a nightmare, I opened a new one. It was a chapter filled with challenges, yes, but also immense love and unexpected opportunities. Emily and I had a long road ahead, but I was ready. For the first time in a long while, I felt the reignition of something I'd nearly lost. The months that followed were a blur of lawyer appointments, court visits, and late-night feeding sessions with Emily. But amid the chaos, something incredible happened. I grew stronger, not just as a mother, but as an individual. With every challenge we faced, my resolve hardened. I had a daughter to raise, a job to excel at, and a life to rebuild. Landing a management position at a large company felt like a small victory in a sea of battles. The environment was fast-paced, the responsibilities many, but I thrived. It was as if all the hardships had culled away my weaknesses, leaving a core of unbreakable strength. "Margaret, you've really turned this department around," my boss, Richard, said during a performance review. "Ever considered moving up the ladder? We've got a directorial position opening soon." The offer was tempting, but I hesitated. "I appreciate the opportunity, Richard, but my plate's quite full right now, especially with Emily." Richard smiled understandingly. "Family comes first, always. But the offer's on the table whenever you're ready." Life at home was no less hectic, but every bit as rewarding. Through the state's early intervention program, we were able to start Emily on a regimen of specialized therapies. The sparkle in her eyes as she grasped new ways of communicating melted away any remnants of exhaustion or stress I might felt. The most heartwarming moment came when Emily started using her first sign language words. More, she would sign during mealtimes, her little fingers coming together in a gesture that spoke volumes. Those silent words were symphonies to my soul, filling spaces I never knew were empty. The divorce was finalized, and while Tom got the family car, I got the house and full custody of Emily. The house, once a symbol of marital hopes, had become our sanctuary, a mother-daughter fortress against the world. And then came David, a colleague turned close friend whose presence crept into my life like a soothing melody. We'd collaborate on projects, sharing laughs and subtle glances until one day the line between professional and personal blurred into something beautiful. "I really admire you, Margaret," David said one evening as we were working late. "You're an incredible woman and an amazing mom." I blushed, my heart soaring at his words. "Thank you, David. That means a lot coming from you. Would you consider going out for dinner sometime? Maybe this weekend? Just the two of us?" he asked, taking a courageous step over the line we'd been towing for months. I smiled, touched by his sincerity and perhaps ready for another shot at love. "I'd like that, David. I really would." As time passed, Emily began to recognize David as a consistent, loving presence. They developed their own little bond, complete with inside jokes and secret handshakes. The first time Emily referred to him as Daddy, In her own special way, signing the word carefully, my eyes filled with tears of joy. David looked at me, his eyes equally moist, and we shared a silent, powerful moment of understanding. Life was not without its challenges, but we faced them as a family, a unit bound not just by love, but by choice and commitment. I had taken the scattered, frayed threads of my existence and woven them into something new, something beautiful and strong. And while happiness is never a constant state, it became our predominant one, punctuated by moments of ordinary magic and extraordinary love. But as anyone who has lived long enough knows, the past has a way of reappearing when you least expect it, teaching you lessons you didn't know you needed to learn. Little did I know, my journey of rebuilding was about to come full circle, in the most unexpected of places. Life had a funny way of coming full circle. One ordinary evening, after another day of juggling work meetings and Emily's appointments, I stopped by a small store on my way home to grab some groceries. Pushing my cart through the narrow aisles, I collected the essentials: milk, bread, some fruits, and vegetables. When I finally made my way to the cash register, my heart nearly stopped. There, behind the counter, was Tom. Our eyes met, and a myriad of emotions flashed across his face. Surprise, recognition, and finally, a trace of shame. The air was thick with the unsaid as he began scanning my items. "Margaret," he finally spoke, breaking the silence. "Tom," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's been a while," he continued, avoiding eye contact. "How's Emily?" "Thriving," I said, unable to keep a hint of pride out of my voice. "She's learning new signs every day and doing well in her therapy." "That's good to hear," Tom mumbled, bagging the last of the groceries. I handed him my credit card, and as he processed payment, he looked up. "Look, Margaret, Before he could finish, I interrupted. "Save it, Tom. Just save it." He handed me the receipt, a soft sigh escaping his lips. As I began to wheel my cart away, he called out, "Margaret, wait." I stopped, partly out of curiosity, partly out of a desire for closure. "What is it?" "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," Tom stammered. "I messed up royally. Margarita left me when the money ran out. Had to sell my car just to make rent. And now, well, you see where I've ended up. So karma exists after all," I said, a mixture of bitterness and relief lacing my words. "Yeah, I suppose it does," he agreed, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "I hope life's treating you better than I ever did." "Incredibly so," I replied. "I found someone who loves both me and Emily. Someone who understands what family truly means." With that, I pushed my cart out of the store, leaving Tom standing there, a picture of regret and lost opportunities. As I loaded the groceries into my car, I felt an odd sense of liberation. It was as if I'd finally closed a chapter of my life that had been left annoyingly ajar. Driving home, my thoughts drifted to David and Emily, the loves of my life who had filled the voids left by betrayal and disappointment. Pulling into the driveway, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had lost much, but I'd also gained immeasurably. As I walked through the front door, Emily ran up to greet me, her face lighting up in a radiant smile. David followed, planting a tender kiss on my lips as he took the grocery bags from my hands. In that moment, as Emily tugged at my skirt to show me her newest sign language achievement, I felt an incomparable richness in my soul. Here, in this simple yet profound scene, was my vindication, my triumph, my love. Life had taken me through turbulent tides only to bring me ashore on a beach more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. And as I looked at my family, my heart swelled with an emotion so potent it needed no words. Deaf or otherwise,